The soft hum of fluorescent lights echoed across the top floor of the Skymark Tower. Glass walls stretched around the perimeter, giving an unobstructed view of the city below. It was 9:47 a.m. The boardroom, typically sterile and silent, buzzed with tense anticipation. Assistants in tailored suits stood at the edges of the room, tablets in hand, whispering last-minute updates. At the center sat Victor Langston, billionaire, tech mogul, and the man Time magazine had dubbed the architect of the future. Victor wasn't like other billionaires. He didn't believe in luck or destiny. To him, everything came down to math, timing, and information. Every decision he'd made had a formula behind it. Every risk, every acquisition, every expansion. And now, at 56 years old, Victor was about to sign the largest private merger in U.S. history, a $40 billion deal with Corvax Systems, a biotech firm with controversial AI-driven genetics research. The CEO of Corvax, Leonard Drake, leaned back in his chair opposite Victor, fingers steepled, a smile tugging at his lips. His confidence was palpable. The legal teams on both sides had reviewed every line, the ink on the contracts barely dry from the printers. All that remained was a signature. Victor picked up his Mont Blanc pen and paused for a moment, studying the top sheet of the contract. From the back of the room, the sound of a mop bucket rolling across tile floor broke the charged silence. Everyone turned their heads. Maria Velasquez, 62 years old, a janitor in the building for nearly 15 years, was dragging her cart in. She looked confused, maybe even slightly annoyed. She'd been told the room was available for cleaning. It wasn't unusual for her to be invisible to these men in suits. She cleaned around their expensive shoes, scrubbed out the evidence of their working lunches, and left before anyone ever noticed she was there. One of the assistants rushed toward her. "Ma'am, you can't be here right now. This is a confidential meeting." Maria's eyes flicked toward the long conference table. She saw Victor. Everyone knew who he was. And then she saw the papers. "No," she said. "Don't sign that." The room fell utterly still. Leonard Drake gave a scoffing laugh. "Excuse me?" Victor turned in his chair, his brows knitting slightly. He studied Maria carefully. "I said," she repeated slowly, her voice firmer now, "don't sign that contract." Security started to move forward. Victor raised a hand. "Wait." The room was stunned. You didn't interrupt Victor Langston. You didn't question his decisions. And you certainly didn't stop billion-dollar deals from a mop bucket. He stood, eyes locked on Maria. "Why did you say that?" Maria hesitated, then stepped forward. "I clean this floor every night," she began. "You think people like me don't notice things, but we do. And I've seen the men from Corvax in this room before. Weeks ago. They were arguing. They didn't know I was in the closet. I heard one of them, a short man with a scar on his jaw. He said something about suppressing a trial result." Victor's pulse quickened. "Suppressing what?" "A result," Maria said. "Something about human trials. I didn't understand everything, but I heard him say it didn't matter if a few people got hurt as long as the data stayed clean. He said you would never find out because you wanted the deal too badly." A nervous murmur rippled through the lawyers and aides. Leonard Drake's face went pale. "That's ridiculous," Drake said quickly. "She's a janitor, for God's sake. She's making it up." Victor turned toward him. His expression was unreadable. "Were you in this building before today?" Victor asked him. Drake hesitated. "Once or twice." "More than twice," Maria interjected. "You met with a man named Harold in room 418. I saw him come in with a suitcase." Drake's lips parted, but no words came. Victor's mind was racing. He remembered room 418, a conference room used for private briefings. It was supposed to be empty that day. He picked up his phone and made a single call. Jessica, he said to his chief security officer, pull the CCTV from level 41 3 weeks ago, Wednesday and Friday. Look for Leonard Drake and anyone entering room 418. He ended the call and stared at Drake. You've got 5 minutes. Anything you want to tell me? Drake's smug confidence was gone. He looked around the room, suddenly realizing how exposed he was. Victor, he said quietly, you don't understand how competitive this field is. Sometimes we have to push forward, even when the regulators drag their feet. The tech we've developed, it could extend human life. We can't let a few minor trial anomalies derail that. Victor took a slow step forward. Minor anomalies? Were people harmed? Drake said nothing. The door opened. Jessica entered, breathless, holding a tablet. She handed it silently to Victor. The footage showed Drake entering room 418 with a man identified as Harold Myers, Corvax's clinical research director, and handing over a sealed envelope. The timestamp matched the day Maria had mentioned. Victor's jaw clenched. He turned slowly and looked at Maria. Thank you, he said softly. Then he turned to his lawyers. Shred every copy of that contract. We're done here. Drake rose from his seat, furious. You're making a mistake. You think some janitor's eavesdropping should derail this merger? You'll regret this, Victor. No, Victor said calmly. You will. Security escorted Leonard Drake out. The room was silent again. The assistants whispered among themselves, exchanging astonished glances. Victor walked over to Maria. Why did you speak up? He asked. She looked at him, eyes firm. Because my niece was part of a Corvax trial. She got sick. They told her it was unrelated. But after I heard that conversation, I knew it wasn't right. I couldn't let you sign it. Not if you didn't know the truth. Victor nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card. I want you to come see me Monday. My office, 8 a.m. sharp. We need people with your kind of integrity. Maria blinked in surprise, then slowly nodded. Victor turned and walked to the window. The city sprawled below, glittering under the morning sun. For the first time in years, he felt something other than calculation or strategy coursing through him. He felt clarity, and a strange, quiet gratitude for a cleaning lady with the courage to speak the truth. Because sometimes, the smallest voice in the room is the one that saves everything. And in that moment, Victor Langston realized real wealth wasn't in the billions. It was in the people you chose to listen to and the ones brave enough to be heard. Victor Langston stood at the floor-to-ceiling window long after the room had emptied. The skyline blurred before him as rain began to patter gently against the glass, cleansing the city in slow streaks. His reflection stared back at him. Sharp suit, ironed confidence, eyes now shadowed by something rare, humility. He hadn't felt that emotion in decades. Behind him, the janitor's cart squeaked softly. Maria was gathering her things, preparing to leave, unsure whether she had just risked her job or changed the course of history. Maria, Victor said without turning around, do you have a moment? She paused. Yes, sir. You said your niece was part of a Corvax trial? Yes, she replied. Elena. She's 24. She volunteered for a program advertised to help people with autoimmune diseases. They promised cutting-edge therapy. No cost. They told her she was lucky to be accepted. Victor turned from the window and faced her. What happened to her? She got worse, Maria said, her voice tight. Fevers, swelling, hallucinations. After the third treatment, she collapsed. They said it wasn't related, that it must be her condition progressing. But when I asked for records, they were vague. Then she received a non-disclosure agreement to keep her from talking. They offered to pay her $5,000 if she signed it. Victor's fists clenched. He had built his empire on innovation, yes, but also transparency, efficiency, data, never lies, never human collateral. Maria added quietly, she didn't sign it. She said silence would be worse than the illness. Victor slowly walked toward her. I want to speak to Elena. Is she well enough to talk? She has good days and bad, Maria said. But I think she'd want to speak with you. Victor nodded. I'll send a car. Tomorrow morning, if she's able. Maria hesitated. You believe me? I do now, Victor said. And I'll make it right. The next morning, the Blacktown car pulled into a quiet neighborhood in Queens. Elena Velasquez stepped slowly onto the porch of her aunt's modest house. Her gait was unsteady, her skin pale, but her eyes were fierce. Victor met her there, not with the air of a billionaire, but with the silence of a man listening. They sat at the kitchen table, the scent of strong coffee between them. I don't want money, Elena said first. I understand, Victor said. I want people to know what happened. I want them to stop doing this to other families. Victor nodded. You have my word. Over the next 2 hours, she laid out her story, dates, injections, symptoms, correspondence with Corvax employees. Victor recorded every word, took notes with his own hand, and asked questions like an investigative journalist. By the end of their conversation, he was certain. Corvax had deliberately concealed the side effects of its treatments, fast-tracked approval processes using falsified trial summaries, and offered bribes disguised as compensation. But more than that, they had gambled with real human lives, believing no one would question them. He drove back to Skymark Tower and summoned his team, not the board, not the investors, but a private group of internal auditors and legal minds he trusted more than anyone. The same people he used when investigating companies before hostile takeovers. People who could peel back a company's shell and see its heart or its rot. I want every project Corvax is running pulled apart, Victor ordered. I want trial data, patient records, financial trails, offshore subsidiaries. If there's a skeleton buried anywhere, dig until we find the damn grave. The team sprang into action. By day's end, Victor had in his hand a preliminary report. And it was worse than even Maria or Elena had implied. 3 whistleblowers had attempted to report safety violations internally at Corvax. Each had been terminated within weeks. At least one trial in Brazil had resulted in multiple unexplained deaths, written off as comorbidities. The man with the scarred jaw, Harold Myers, had financial ties to a dummy company that received millions in consulting fees shortly after each clinical phase was approved. Victor stared at the documents in silence. Then he leaned back in his chair and whispered, they were going to use me to clean their slate. The acquisition was a laundering operation. Corvax had gambled that under Victor Langston's credibility, no one would dare question their ethics. Not anymore. The next day, Victor held a press conference. It wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. The media expected a launch, a merger, maybe a new AI product. No one expected what happened next. Victor stood before the cameras, wearing a charcoal suit and no tie. His voice was calm but sharp. I was prepared to acquire Corvax systems. However, new information has come to light, evidence of unethical clinical practices, data suppression, and deliberate harm to trial participants. Effective immediately, I am not only terminating the acquisition, I am launching a full private investigation into the company's medical trials, including those conducted abroad. Gasps rippled through the audience. I want to be clear, he continued. This decision was not made by analysts or lawyers. It began with a woman who cleans my building, a woman who chose to speak the truth. even when no one expected her voice to matter. Her name is Maria Velasquez. He gestured, and the cameras turned as Maria stepped shyly onto the stage beside him. She and her niece showed more courage than anyone in a boardroom has in years, Victor said. They reminded me that listening matters more than calculation, and that sometimes the most powerful truths come from the quietest corners. Reporters erupted with questions. Victor didn't answer them. He stepped aside, letting Maria have the spotlight. She didn't speak long, but what she said was remembered. "I'm not a doctor or a scientist," she said. "I clean floors. I notice things. I care about people. And I believe that when something's wrong, you don't need permission to say it." The fallout was immediate. Shares of Corvax plummeted overnight. The Department of Health and Human Services opened an investigation. Former employees came forward in droves. Leaked emails revealed a systematic pattern of concealment and fraud. International partners pulled funding. Within 2 weeks, Corvax's board dissolved. Its CEO, Leonard Drake, was arrested at a private airfield attempting to flee the country. Elena's story became a national conversation. She was interviewed by every major outlet. Maria received a Medal of Civic Bravery from the city. But more than fame, what they received was validation and change. Victor Langston, for his part, made a decision no one expected. He created the Velasquez Foundation for Ethical Science, seeded with $500 million of his own wealth. Its mission: fund medical innovations with mandatory public oversight, patient advocacy groups at every phase, and independent safety audits. He also implemented a new company policy: the silence clause reversal. Any employee at any level, from janitor to engineer, could report something anonymously and directly to a three-person oversight panel, and if proven credible, would receive not just protection, but recognition and reward. And he invited Maria to be the first civilian oversight chair. When asked why, he answered simply, "Because she sees what the rest of us ignore." Months passed. Victor began visiting clinics and hospitals unannounced. He sat with trial patients. He watched how data was recorded, how consent forms were explained. He even began attending ethics seminars. He had once thought his legacy would be defined by innovation. Now he knew it would be measured by how much human dignity his empire preserved. One afternoon, as he left a small research facility in Newark, a nurse approached him. "You're Victor Langston," she said. "I am," he replied. "My mother works in the Skymark Tower," the nurse said, smiling. "She's a cleaner. She told me what happened. Said you listened to someone like her. That means a lot to us." Victor paused. "There's no someone like her," he said. "There's just people. Some speak louder. Some speak when no one's listening. But we all deserve to be heard." She nodded and shook his hand. As he walked to his car, he saw the city in a new light. Not from a tower, not from behind glass, but from the street, from the ground where voices rise upward, hoping someone notices. He thought of Maria, pushing her cart through the silence. He thought of Elena, refusing to be paid off. And he realized something profound. Wealth is not money. Power is not control. And truth does not need permission. It only needs someone brave enough to speak, and someone willing to listen. Victor had once believed the world was built by men like him, the billionaires, the visionaries, the dealmakers. But now he knew better. The world is saved by the ones no one sees, until they finally speak, and someone chooses to hear.